Hello, and welcome to the Nature Disturbed podcast, a podcast about the good, the offensive, and the confusing parts of the animal kingdom. This podcast was recorded on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. I pay my respects to elders past and present. This episode contains strong language and adult themes. As ever, please feel free to check out the visual companion to this episode at Nature Disturbed on Instagram. Last time, we ventured further than we may ever go, to the distant planet K2-18b. There, among other things, we learned that there's no place far enough in this galaxy to allow you to escape from Katy Perry. On today's journey, I'll be travelling much closer to home. My home, which is in Melbourne, Australia, and I'm dressed for 4 seasons in one day. Underneath everything, I'm wearing a bikini. Over that, I have a pair of shorts and a t-shirt, over which I'm donning jeans and a jumper. And on top of everything, I'm wearing a coat, scarf, and mittens. I'm sat, of course, in my kitchen sink, which I filled with hot coffee. For those of you who are from Melbourne, you'll know that Melbourne is internationally famous for its coffee. And for those of you who aren't from Melbourne, you probably won't know that. Today's tale is a tale set here in this city. It's about the environment here and how it has been affected by European colonisation. It's a tale about metamorphosis and queerness in nature. It's a tale of how we can incorporate non-Western methodologies into piecing together scientific mysteries, using First Nations knowledge. If all that sounds like too much woke, look, I get it, too much woke is wrong, but I'm not woke. Would you say that someone who sleeps next to a life-size silicone replica of Donald Trump, complete with holes, is woke? If it is, then lock me up. But above everything, today is about the mystery of eels. Slithering, slimy, and secretive. These are words that could be used to describe British politicians. Wow, am I a political podcast? To help contextualise today's topic, here's a quote from the Mighty Boosh. Thanks, Bridget, for the suggestion. Eels, eels, eels. Give it up now. Elements of the past and elements of the future. Coming at ya. Eels are creatures which have not been covered before on this podcast, especially not in episode 3, because electric eels are not true eels, they're knife fishes. Eels are very mysterious creatures indeed. Their mysterious ways have not just plagued the minds of scientists, but also of philosophers, of polymaths, and of me, a concerned citizen. There are many species, including the European eel, the American eel, and the Japanese eel. Jesus, what boring names. From ancient history, eels have left various cultures scratching their heads, although that might be because in ancient history people used to have scabies and fleas. Either way, the ancient Egyptians, Romans, and Greeks mused over them. The Egyptians theorized that eels came from the sun, shining on the River Nile. Pliny the Elder, who was a Roman naturalist, decided that these creatures were born of the dead skin of eels that rubbed against rocks. Even Aristotle had a hand at working out the origins of these remarkable fish. In the 4th century BC, through years of research spent by himself sitting in a dark room and examining the bodies of eels, Aristotle placed his support behind the theory that they are formed when mud mixes with water from the entrails of the earth. That's because he couldn't find any sex organs on them, and so he concluded that they don't have sex. After spending all that time alone and smelling of fish, It's safe to say that Aristotle wasn't having any sex either. History had assigned eels to asexuality, until a shocking discovery in the 1700s of an eel with ovaries. Well, then the search for testicles was on. In my life, that search is always on, but I digress. During that time, none other than Sigmund Freud made an attempt to find them, which was in vain. He dissected over 400 eels in his search for eel testicles, but he couldn't find any. It wasn't until the late 1800s that a male eel with testes was discovered. So there it was, a female with ovaries and a male with testes. The fact that some mature eels had visible genitals, but for thousands of years most of them seemingly didn't, raises more questions than it answers. But thanks to the discovery of these balls, the scientific ball was rolling. And it rolled and rolled and rolled. And now, as I'm sat here in my kitchen sink in 2025, we know eels' secrets. Now, I don't want to harp on for too long about European eels, but they're a great introduction to this mysterious creature. Eels worldwide have remained elusive, including the ones here in Melbourne, the short-finned eel. To find out more, I'm going to speak to urban geographer Dr Alex Faustino, whose research centres on the waterscapes of Melbourne. I'm not going to be handing you back to my past self, because all I have to do today is step outside and walk a short distance to the river. I thought we could move in real time. Plus, I'm starting to overheat sat here in all this hot coffee wearing these clothes, so let's go. All I have to do is gently get out of this sink. It's just a slightly awkward angle. Ouch. That's fine. I'll survive. It's better to fall out the sink and sprain your wrist than, to get eaten by cats, I guess. I inflated a rubber ring last night and left it by the door, so I'll collect that now to bring with me. This will help aid my journey today. Oh, hello Melbourne. It's a cloudy day with a spot of drizzle, but give it half an hour and that may have changed. Our journey begins. We're going to the Yarra, the river that runs through this city of 5 million people. I'm walking from my home in the inner city to the closest part of the river. I stink of coffee. It's making me want one. I must find and suckle upon the bitter teat of a barista. Oh, perfect. Here's a coffee shop now. Excuse me. Can I please order a coffee? A large cappuccino with 4 extra shots.
Oh no, 4 extra shots? That's 7 shots of coffee, mate, are you sure?
Pardon?
4 extra shots of coffee, that's 7 shots in total, mate.
Yes.
Here you are, mate.
Thank you, have a nice day. What on earth was that man saying? That's coffee sorted. Now I feel energised. To the Yarra. Why did caffeine evolve? Obviously it helps keep us feel alive. But what do plants get out of it? Well, it acts as a pesticide and it can paralyse insects trying to take a bite. But today isn't about coffee. That coffee has gone to my head. Did you know that caffeine production has evolved independently in tea, coffee, cacao, some citrus plants and many more unrelated species, and an example of convergent evolution? Yeah! It just so happens that the molecular structure of caffeine is similar in shape to that of adenosine, a molecule which makes us drowsy. As such, caffeine binds to the same receptors, blocking adenosine and so preventing us from feeling tired. And I've made it to the river, the Yarra, as it runs through Yarra Bend Park, Melbourne's largest natural bushland park. It would be helpful to find someone to see if they have seen any eels today. Oh look, a men's public toilet. 2 men just went inside holding hands. Let me see if one of them might know. They just went into the same cubicle. Well, they can't need any privacy if they're both in there, so that's good news. Hello? Hello, yes, I'm wondering if anybody has seen any eels. You guys? I'm trying to find an eel. No response. Weird. Anyway, I can't stand here all day. I'll have to begin the search myself. Now, to the riverside. Let's see. Ah, perfect slope. Here's a sign. Deep rock canoe ramp. Warning, swimming not advised. Perfect. I have a rubber ring with me. In I get. Ah. What nice cool water. That's taken the edge off. No more coffee for me today. Here along the banks, it's green. Eucalyptus, acacia, mistletoe, mosses, lichens, yellow flowers in the grass and thick in the bushes. This lush environment flanks the river on both sides. The Yarra River is 242 kilometres long and has a catchment area of over 4,000 square kilometres. Now before I go on, I have to take off my coat, scarf and gloves. They're sodden. Oh, that's better. I'll hold on to these clothes. Now I've got my jumper and jeans on show. Where was I? There are eels living here, in Melbourne. That's right. You may have gathered that already. And I have heard rumours that they have been swimming underneath Elizabeth Street. Yes, that's right, Elizabeth Street. One of the busiest streets in Melbourne's city centre. Elizabeth Street, where independent art shops stand alongside dessert parlours, hostels, restaurants, and people pooing and screaming at pigeons. These rumours of eels under Elizabeth Street are right now just that, rumours. So not only will I try to find one today, but I'm also headed downstream to meet someone who can confirm or deny. That's Dr Alex Faustino, who specialises in the waterways of Melbourne and how we, humans, and other animals such as eels, interact with them. He's a very dear friend of mine. He loves gossip, spreading malicious rumours, besmirching good names, and he is a self-proclaimed eel expert. Oh my god, the number of times he has mentioned eels to me, unprompted, is just outrageous. It's harassment, actually, involving eels. I hate to throw the word around, but it verges on bullying. Eels this, eels that, blah blah blah. Anyway, quite useful for today's topic. And we're going to use his penchant for gossip and for eels to our advantage. We want to know, is it true they're under Elizabeth Street? What other places do they go to during their lives? Why are they so mysterious? And how has the knowledge of First Nations people helped reveal some of their secrets? This river flows through the lands of the Wurundjeri and Birr-arrung peoples. The relationship between these peoples and the Yarra, known first as the Birr-arrung, is one which goes back thousands of years. The river and the surrounding area were once a patchwork of wetlands, and the lives of the people living here were intimately connected with the land and with the lives of eels. Oh no, my first animal encounter. An Australian magpie, up there in the tree. It's going to kill me. For those of you who don't know, Australian magpies spell instant death. They like to swoop, and they go for the eyes. Ah, it's swooping me. Ugh, I've lived a good life. Why do I deserve this? This is how I end. It's gone. Thank heavens, I'm still alive. An animal encounter, sure, but there's no sign of an eel yet. Oh, how lovely. Here comes the sun. You know what? I think it's shorts and t-shirt weather, so I'll get this jumper and jeans off. In fact, I'll go straight to my bikini. Let me place them all here gently on the side of my rubber ring. Can you hear that? It sounds like a waterfall. I'm sure it's nothing to worry about. Despite years of being shrouded in mystery, we now know that eels are migratory species. So, how has the appearance of the large city of Melbourne affected their ability to travel? Well, in myriad ways. The very structure of the river and the appearance of man-made obstacles has... what is that noise? Oh, it is a waterfall. It's Dights Falls. How exciting. This is the sort of man-made obstacle I was talking about. Although it's built upon a natural divide between two types of rocks, it has been developed by people. I should be fine. It's only a metre or two in height. Here we go. I accidentally swallowed some water just then, but apart from that, I'd call that a success. Since colonisation began in the 1800s, the route and flow of the Yarra has been tampered with. Another waterfall used to exist much further downstream, known as the Yarra Falls, where Queen Street Bridge now stands. Before it was destroyed by the colonists in the 1880s with dynamite to improve boating access, the Yarra Falls used to separate the fresh water running over them from the salt water below. Today, the two bodies of water mix, making the whole lower portion of the river slightly salty. And the Yarra wasn't always so brown. It was clearer before Europeans arrived. The brown colour comes from suspended clay, the result of surface runoff, now that there's so much agricultural land upstream. How might the water quality affect eels? Well, eels are excellent bioindicators. They're sensitive to their surroundings, and their health and abundance is an indication of overall ecosystem health. As such, the quality of the water they inhabit is imperative to their survival. Even trace amounts of certain chemicals can be detrimental to them. One study of eels in the River Thames, which runs right through the middle of London, revealed that cocaine, likely entering the river from people's urine, has started accumulating in eels' bodies. This might be causing muscle damage, which could in turn be affecting their ability to undergo their epic migrations. Oh no, where have my clothes gone? I've lost them. That's terrible. I'm a litter bug, through and through. Apparently I'm contributing to the tons of litter and billions of microplastics which flow down the Yarra every year. Shame. A lesson learned. At least I still have my bikini on. The Yarra has become cleaner now than it was a century or two ago. In the mid and late 19th century, Melbourne had the colloquial name of Smelbourne, in part because the Yarra was particularly polluted, essentially an open sewer. But there's still a long way to go. Even recently, there's been E. coli found in the river, and updates tell residents the water quality because it's subject to change. Mercifully, Melbourne has become the first Australian city to commit to having a swimmable river by 2050. That would imply that it's not necessarily swimmable right now. Certainly somewhere along my journey today, swimming is no longer permitted, and the water becomes a boating-only zone. But that's okay, because I'm in a rubber ring, which counts. Still no sign of an eel. Maybe my mistake is looking for it. Mysterious animals often don't appear to those who are actively trying to find them. Is there anyone else I can ask? The footpath seems to have diverged from the riverside, so now it's just bushland on either side. No one's around. Oh wait, there's a group of young men over there, under a tree by the riverbank. They're all jostling around in the bush, and I think one of them is trying to start a fire. One of them's holding a knife. I wonder if one of them has seen an eel. Hey you guys! Has any of you seen an eel today? An eel? I'm trying to find one. They're laughing at me. I don't get it. Oh, now they're throwing rocks at me. Leave me alone. Unless you see an eel, in which case, come find me. Is it bad that I find this quite arousing? Let's paddle away quickly. Geez, they're acting like they've never seen a man in a bikini floating down the Yarra before. Well, that's in the past now. The river has exited the park, and we're now heading closer and closer to the heart of the city. I'm starting to believe I'll never find an eel. It's like I said, when you're looking for an animal as elusive as the eel, you'll never find one. So I'm going to stop looking. Oh look, an eel. Oh, how exciting. It's long and thin and eel-like, I suppose. And, yeah. Alex will be thrilled to hear about this. Oh, and here come some rowers. Oh, they'll be so excited about this. Hey, you guys, there's an eel here.
Get out of the way!
Very rude. At least Alex would appreciate this. I better mentally prepare myself for him and for his obsession with eels, and also give him a proper introduction. He's part of a research group known as APR, which stands for Alliance for Praxis Research. He might have told me before what the word praxis means, but if he has, I didn't listen, so you'll have to Google that one. APR are a collective of researchers who incorporate their expertise across environmental studies, urban design, anthropology, and other fields into social change and knowledge sharing. They are currently gearing up for their radical public art installation, Projections of a Current Future, which follows the story of the eels of Melbourne. I've personally known Alex since 2021. Oh, I see him there, by the bank, waiting for me. I nearly didn't recognise him. He's dressed as a fairy. He's wearing a pink tutu, fairy wings, and he's holding a little wand with a star on the end. I love that for him. He looks great, but I think I won't comment or draw attention to his outfit choice out of politeness. He's standing right by the busy Flinders Street Station, with Elizabeth Street just on the other side. Now, I have to heave myself out of the bank in front of all of these people. Hi, Alex. I've just gently paddled down the Yarra River and climbed out at Flinders Street. That's why I'm soaked. I accidentally drank some river water and I feel quite sick, but I saw an eel, so I'm very happy and I'm feeling very excited to run into you to talk more about them. Thanks for meeting me.
Wow, that sounds amazing. Thanks for inviting me, and next time you do that crossing on the river, let me know. I'll love to join and swim with you and try to find some eel friends, perhaps some platypus.
Ooh, if we're lucky.
Yeah.
Alex, you are being recorded. Everything that you say will be held against you. You're a self-proclaimed eel expert. You've told me before that no one knows more about eels than you. So I've just got a couple of warm-up questions.
Right.
That might help. So first of all, Alex, you consider yourself to be an eel expert. But can you tell me which of the following four animals is not technically an eel? 1, the gulper eel. 2, the spaghetti eel. 3, moray eel. 4, the horse.
Well, from all my eel expertise, which at some crazy dream might have come across to you, I could say I don't know precisely the first two, but definitely the moray.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Second warm-up question. Alex, you have 2 boyfriends, Nick and Tom.
Yes.
Which of these 2 would win in a fight?
What sort of fight?
A punch-up.
Tricky one. Maybe we should do a test, because I don't have enough observations to conclude.
Yeah, I'd like to see that. What I want to know is, you've got an eel tattoo.
Yes.
Why do you love eels so much?
Do you want me to tell about the story of the tattoo?
Yes, please.
Yeah, okay. Probably one of my first significant encounters with an eel. And it's a funny thing because I'm Brazilian and I've been living in Australia, in Naarm, for 6 years when I came for my PhD. And we don't have these eels in Brazil. Or at least the species that occur in the Americas, they are not so widespread in the South America. So I never encountered an eel before coming to Australia. And it was maybe about 4 years ago. I was traveling with my boyfriends in the Royal National Park in New South Wales, just south from Sydney. And one of the days, I think we were there around late December, we were doing a lovely trip and a hike. And we're just like sitting and observing quietly nature when we can. And it's very fascinating, the things that unfold and reveal to yourself when you're just there being quiet. So we were in that moment squatting actually by the creek, being like very marveled with how water would distort light and create those patterns of colors touching the bedrock of the creek with all those shades of ochre and yellow. And we've been sitting there for a few minutes, and suddenly this little nest of gum leaves underwater started to move in a different flow than the water was doing. One of the leaves was moving a lot. And by just looking a bit more and closer, suddenly this head popped out of the leaves and started swimming out of that little nest. And then I realized the leaf that was moving was actually the tail of the creature, which then we saw was a probably juvenile eel. But I was just marveled by it, because when he popped the head out the front of the body, you could see like the gills moving, and they were very translucent, but still with mother pearl glow of rainbow, many colors reflecting from the gills. And just the whole movement so fluid, so yeah, just flowing with the creek and swimming downstream and getting a bit away from us. That was very touching, magical for me. And it just printed this memory and curiosity about eels. So I started just reading a bit more and understanding their biology and being fascinated by their migration flows, which are insane, and their life cycles to those migrations. So there was something there also about me understanding my identity as a migrant and my connection with Australia in such a profound, intimate moment there that led me to this idea of tattooing, making the tattoo in my arm, which was actually my first tattoo.
It's a good tattoo. What a vivid description. That's very nice. So I've done some research into you. You are an urban geographer whose research is rooted in ecology, environmental management, urban planning, regeneration, and activism. Why have you never mentioned that?
Maybe I should. I've been waiting for you to ask.
What does that involve? What does your research involve at the moment?
Well, at the moment, I'm doing a postdoctoral research at RMIT University, where I'm precisely studying how activist initiatives and organizations play a role, or how do they play their role in the regeneration of waterscapes. And I'm using here waterscapes to describe human-water relationships and the landscapes we create from those relationships, which involves also our technologies, our policies, our knowledges and memories. I began as an environmental manager in analysis. Then I specialized in urban planning, urbanism, urban studies, but always following the path of water, water-related questions on how can we plan what you could call water-sensitive cities.
What is a water-sensitive city, please?
Nice, good question. So, broadly say, since the late 80s, early 90s, you could see the emergence of a few movements on developing new ways of managing, designing, building urbanized landscapes that are trying to be in more harmony with water flows. So historically, in a Western modern sense, we developed this very engineered, gray set of technologies to control water in our landscapes for the needs, primary needs of humans only. So we need provision of water for drinking, the sanitation, the control of stormwater in the cities to avoid flooding. So building our landscapes to accommodate this idea of a city as we know, where water is just part of the services, and that implicated changing a lot the original natural features of how water would be present there. But that comes with all its limits and disruptions, even when you have a flooding or when those systems fail of treating water or when contamination even happens. And not to mention also the destruction of ecologies that are related with those water flows. So the accumulation of those side effects over halfway of 20th century led to this push to, we need to do this in a different way. And that led to the emergence of these different practices of planning water in cities and our water technologies. So how could we, for example, clean storm water, not on a water treatment facility only, but using natural processes of sedimentation, of biofiltration, using living components like bacteria and plants to clear some of the contamination present in the water, and by doing so also creating spaces that are actual habitats of wetlands, of marshes that are performing their role but also providing places for other species to live. So in Australia, that took the name of water-sensitive urban design, later evolved into water-sensitive cities.
So Melbourne is a city which, as it's been developed, eels have been one of the animals affected by its sprawl. Now, Alex, let's talk about eels.
Okay.
In as much vivid detail as you can about their life cycle, because you've told me before, and it's crazy. It's mental.
Yes, thanks for asking it. And I'm again, although you putting me in that place, I'm not the expert of eels here, just been learning bits and pieces with people who've been studying them and observing them a lot from even thousands of years. So I think the first time that I learned more about that cycle was when I was visiting the Butch-Beam cultural landscape probably about 2 years ago. Butch-Beam has profound cultural significance because as a cultural landscape is inscribed by UNESCO World Heritage List. It was the first Indigenous-led nomination from Australia to reach that category. But it is a site with the longest known continuous aquaculture practice led by the First Nations of the Gunditj Mara. But when I was visiting, one of parts of the visit was learning a bit about their eels' life cycle journey. And it's a cycle, so I'll pick a point to start and we'll continue from there. But imagine you are in a freshwater space.
This is in Australia.
Yes, I should have mentioned, like imagine we are in Australia, maybe in the southeast Australia, in Victoria, in New South Wales, or even from New Zealand. Could be a lake, could be a pond. And there eels grow and mature from their more juvenile phase into becoming elvers in the freshwater space. So they might take around 15 years to mature into that phase. They're very fascinating because they are omnivorous creatures. They can eat anything that fits their mouth. And because of that, they are also, from an ecological point of view, top creatures in the food chain, and really good indicators of the environmental quality of that space. If they are flourishing, if they are thriving, it's because you have all the other conditions, biological and non-biological, for them to exist, other species being there as well. So at some point they will mature from the elver to the yellow eel phase, still in their freshwater continental space. And some factors which are still not totally known, there's a lot of unknown things about the eels yet. But at some point they will start a journey moving out from that place, from that area where they were growing. And they're very territorial. They stay for pretty much all those years growing around that same space. But they start migrating again, because they've done that before. So they will get out of this fresh water and heading downstream, following the paths of water until they can reach the ocean. But there are many barriers sometimes for them to cross those landscapes. And their bodies are quite equipped to go through some of those barriers. So, especially marshlands, sometimes the flow of water might be interrupted. And they are capable of slither out of the water and go through dry land for a significant length, even a couple of kilometers.
Really?
They can do that.
Oh my God.
Because they can breathe through their skin. So they are this more ancient type of fish that has a kind of hybrid system of breathing, not just for the gills, but have exchanges of oxygen through their skins. So that helps them to cross some distances and continuing finding the path and flow of water until they reach the salt water. Once that happens, a massive change will ignite in their bodies and leads to a very interesting fact. until that point, eels are pretty much genderless. They haven't developed their sexual reproductive system. So they are queer animals to the point, very queer. But it is, again, the conditions that their bodies face when they move from the fresh to the salt water that triggers the metamorphosis, you could say. So all their digestive system is kind of locked, and their reproductive system will develop in the space of those digestive systems. So from that point on, they won't eat anymore. So all they've eaten and grow in their bodies and accumulate on energy is what needed them to take into this next phase. So from that point on, not eating anymore and assuming a kind of male and female gender. And they start moving in the ocean. From that point, they start moving on a kind of shared and similar journey, which was again unknown until quite recently, to understand where they would go. It was known they would go to the seawater and at some point have a kind of return, but these species will start this journey moving together following the East Australian current all the way. Yes, all the way to what now is known as the Coral Sea. And that is a hell long journey. So at that point, the eels move together or follow this similar journey towards the Coral Sea. And to do so, they will cross approximately 3,000 kilometers. But that is only on tracing a straight line from Southeast Australia to Coral Sea. In fact, while they swim, they go up and down the water column, oscillating in a quite synced way with the moonlight and the moon phase and the daylight pattern. So they move down when it's daylight and they move up when it's night, and that the range of movement changes as well with the moon phases. So imagine that they do way more Ks than just the 3,000 ones until reach the Coral Sea. It's a massive journey. But they go swimming together until they find this area, which is actually a very deep... So the Coral Sea area is actually a very deep trench. And when they reach that space, their bodies are under massive pressure by the water column, which is kilometers of water on top of their bodies. And they go swimming deep in the trench to a point that the pressure is so massive that dissolves and explodes their bodies. And at that point, it mixes the eggs with the sperm of the other eels. And all that dissolved mass of eel's body mix into fertilizes the eggs. So they have actually this extra body fertilization this massive gathering of eels dying and reproducing.
Yeah, just check that I'm following you. The eels are, in this moment, they're swimming so far down that they explode as a result of the pressure.
Yeah.
And then all of their sperm and eggs are released, and that's how mating happens.
Yeah, that's their reproductive cycle. So at that point, now we are there in the trench of the Coral Sea. Eggs have been fertilized, and now water will play a major role of carrying them, continuing their journey. So those fertilized eggs are carried again by the EAC, the East Australian current, and start being dispersed back to the mainlands. And through that process, the eggs mature or breach into the larvae called leptocephalus. They are kind of very thin, small as less than a centimeter long.
Is that a glass
larvae.
eel?
The glass eel is the next phase.
Okay, I jumped the gun.
So between the egg and the glass eels, we have the leptocephalus. It's a very thin and small larvae of the eel phase, and that has very short mobility capacity. So to that point, the ocean is doing the journey for them, with them. At some point, the leptophallus developed into the glass eel, which is it's a bit more known, but it is still very small eel, a couple of centimeters long, very thin, more cylindrical now instead of like flattened, and called glass eel because it's translucent or barely has some color in its body, so it looks like a glass stream swimming. The glass eels are the phases in which they come back to what was the origin point of their progenitors, of the previous generation, and they stay waiting for conditions kind of still not fully understood to be a moment where they will continue the journey into the freshwater. But it's known that it's a particular water temperature and salinity and pH and cycles of the moon influencing as well. A blue moon has to happen, a certain level of the tide. There's so many factors. Until these glass eels, now more slightly developed as a elver, start moving into the freshwater.
Elver.
Yeah.
I love that name.
After the glass eel, you get the elver. But from that point, the glass eel is traversing from the seawater, from the salt water, back into freshwater. And they will start moving further upstream to find the site where they will go into their growing, body growing journey that I mentioned earlier. Might take about 15 years in average. And it's quite fascinating what those glass eels have to do, because they will again find many barriers to cross as they are trying to swim upstream. Sometimes there are waterfalls, and they have actually the skill to climb those waterfalls, although being just a couple of centimeters long. In their mouths they have certain type of teeth that functions for them to grab the rocks as the water is flowing and slither their tail up, poke the tip of the tail in a hole, and slither the head up, bite the rock again, and go rock climbing.
That's crazy.
Until they cross the waterfall. Inclusively, the Gunditjmara people had one of the waterfalls in their lands named after that place where eels climb. Translates to this interpretation. So yeah, at some point, the juvenile eels will find a place where they feel happy to grow, where they find enough resources and spend those years there growing. Now imagine that through all of that journey, many barriers, predators, anthropic influences, disrupted urbanized landscapes, dams will affect a lot the journey of those eels. Even the market of eels will harvest a lot of the glass eels to grow them in captivity. So there are many human impacts affecting that journey, and over years and decades research has been shown the reduction of populations of eels worldwide, which has been stimulating a lot of more research to try to understand the influence of those impacts and ways that we can try to support better those populations. And again, all that I shared just now, it's what I learned from my visit in the Bujbim cultural landscape. This is knowledge that I've learned from there, from Gunditjmara people telling what their culture has known about the eel's journey and life cycle for millennia, and even in more recent year also partnering with researchers from universities in Australia to actually track those movements of the Australian eel. And there's a very interesting paper that came from the partnership that I'll share with you if you want to link in sort of resources that people can read, which is a good example of indigenous knowledge helping us to understand our ecologies and how we can also be in a better relationship with those traditional knowledges to find ways of supporting the ecologies that we live with. It's so fascinating. Again, from my experience in Bujbim learning, they also shared how eels just keep growing as long as they have resources and food. In average, they might reach 1 meter long and maybe can get thick as maybe, how can I describe?
Alex is making hand gestures. like a thick man's fist.
Yes, probably, or even thicker than that when they're more mature. age.
Nice.
But they can keep growing. So there was records of eel captured in New Zealand that probably couldn't cross some of the barriers to do the journey into the Coral Sea. So it kept eating and reached maybe 3 meters long or something, and as thick as probably a human head.
Head.
Yeah.
Whoa. Can I ask you, Alex, about some of the ways that First Nations people have historically had eels as part of their lives?
Yeah, I'll share a few things again that I learned from my encounters with knowledge holders, with places that have shared this knowledge. Yeah, I can go back to the Gunditjmara knowledge and culture, which is fascinating, as I started mentioning, being the oldest recorded continuing aquaculture system developed by humans. Is still present there. The Gunditjmara over millennia shaped the landscape to create harvesting systems to grow and capture eels. So they have chains of ponds where eels can be captured and stored living. They developed technologies such as the eel traps of woven grasses. They are placed with the heads open of this trap facing the waters coming inside the trap. So the eels, when they're swimming down, they might loop into one of these traps. But by the way the trap is designed, they can swim back. So they stay there, and Gunditjmara people would carry these baskets full of eels and unload them into other water holes that they could create in the landscape, where eels could stay there comfortably, and then they could harvest those eels. They could grab an eel when they needed to cook or prepare them. But that was actually not just like for, the living of one family or all the communities that were located, settled in that area. It was a whole engineered landscape that was the base of a trade practice that the Gunditjmara would have with other First Nations. So they would be very skilled in carrying and cultivating and producing eels, smoking them for preservation, and they could trade this produce with other First Nations that would be skilled in producing different types of products. For example, ochre and other pigments for painting and other tools, or people who would be more skilled on the hunting of kangaroos, for example, and having these trades formed based on the relationships they would have with the land.
Am I right in thinking that there is some sort of use of eels as an adhesive, like a glue?
Oh, okay, yeah, that was one of the things we shared. Again, in my visit there, they shared how part of their knowledge on eels biology was that their skin can be used and transformed into a kind of adhesive property, useful for supporting crafting of hunting tools or building materials to create dwellings. So yeah, fascinating how there's so many properties and uses for eels and what they present. Many other fascinating things that, again, I think it's interesting for people to go and learn from the knowledge holders on those techniques and knowledges.
I'd love to hear more about how we've been able to find out about these mysterious creatures through non-Western methods. Could you please explain what we know about the eels of Melbourne?
Yeah.
And how we know about that?
Yeah, for sure. So in fact, yeah, we are in a landscape here in the lands of Narm or in the lands of Birr-arrung, and I'll start sharing things here that have been part of my learning journey on the indigenous culture and knowledge of this country, particularly with Professor Narwit Caroline Briggs AM. She's a Birr-arrung elder, so an elder of the Birr-arrung nation, of the part of the Kulin nations, with whom I've had the privilege and pleasure to work with and learn from some of her knowledge. So a few things that I'll share coming from her work. For those living and walking through Melbourne CBDs, you might not notice, but there's a river running there. Not talking about the Birr-arrung, but another one right in the middle of the grid. To this day is known as Williams Creek. It is running underneath Elizabeth Street, and in the past emerged as the flooding of the Elizabeth Street. But it floods because there's actually a waterway passing there. It's a feature of the landscape where water tends to accumulate. But with the urbanization of that land, that creek has been piped underground to give way and space for trams and cars and people and buildings to be put out of sight. And it's still a space and a flow of water from which other creatures depend and still use. So the eels that we've been talking about, they have been reported swimming through that creek, is still underground in the pipes, because the actual heads of that creek are located somewhere around Parkville campus of the University of Melbourne. And there were anecdotals of people witnessing the eels moving through the lawns to the grass lawns in rainy days up there in Melbourne campus, as this would be a site of part of the journey of the eels. So when you're talking about indigenous knowledge, again, understanding that it has to be done in relationship with the people who hold that knowledge, and being sensitive to the ways that the knowledge holder is willing to share, to the ways that the sharing and use of knowledge is creating benefits for that community as well. So in the example of the paper that I mentioned about tracking the journey of the eels, the possibility was done by researchers in Australian University partnering with the Gundit Mirring Aboriginal Corporation. And similarly, the opportunities that I had to learn ways of decolonizing my own practice came from that space, came from being in contexts that I was encouraged to be critical and reflexive about the coloniality of my knowledge, and from the opportunities of building relationships with knowledge holders. And I guess, again, my major example from that come from this recent relationship with Caroline Briggs, and a relationship that emerged from actually a group of colleagues and friends that I founded at some point in my PhD. It's been 4 years now, but we are called the Alliance for Praxis Research, also known as APR Collective, where we've been experimenting with ways that we can use the knowledge that we are creating in our academic journeys to produce more actual change and interventions in the real world with people and with places that we are part of. And now we've been working together in probably what has been the major APR project so far, called Projections of a Current Future. It's experimental art performance that's featuring at Melbourne Fringe Festival 2025 this year, so in October, and part of the Deadly Fringe program, the side of the program centering First Nations arts. Now, which is the lead creative artist on this project, as we developed this experience from her story of the journey of the eels. We're inviting the participants to go on that journey with us, retracing the presence and the memory of that water flow in CBD, so-called Williams Creek, from its source to its encounter with Birr-arrung, and getting to know a bit from Narwit's stories and knowledge on the transformations of this country, ere we together move to reanimate the memory of this water country. It's very exciting. In this project, we're also been collaborating with Amina Briggs, who is Narwit's granddaughter. Amina is a visual artist, and she's been illustrating visuals to be projected into the buildings or the urbanized landscape throughout this journey. So, if you want to join on this activity in this experimental performance, we have 2 sessions happening in early October, one in the 4th and another one in the 11th of October. We're having 2 dates because the first one, the 4th, is going to be a mass cycle downstream. So come with your bike if you, experienced, not necessarily experienced cyclists, but if you're happy to flow with us on a bike. But if you want to do the walk, we are only walking on the 11th. You will find more details about times and meeting points on the program, but you can look for projections of a current future in the program. And we'll be promoting and disseminating also in our socials of APR. So in Instagram, you can look for APR Collective and you find us and follow and see some of more of our work. But I'd like to see some of you there if you want to join for our projections of a current future performance.
And if you want to meet Alex, when you head over, look for the man with he's got like a little finger coming out of the middle of his forehead. You won't miss him.
It's my little glass eel coming from my forehead.
It's really cute. That sounds like a very exciting project that APR are up to, and I look forward to coming probably on the 11th because I don't have a bike.
Oh.
Unless I'm allowed to jog alongside on the 4th.
Yeah, you can try jogging. I don't think we're gonna be too fast cycling down, but yeah, if you're coming jogging, you can be prepared for a run.
Okay. And dressing as eels is recommended or mandatory?
Yeah, bring your best eel couture.
Yes. It's very inspiring.
Thanks. It's been great to have you part of the journey as well.
Oh, thanks, Alex. I'm their intern, as much as they denounce me. So, eels are notoriously mysterious creatures. I mean, across the world as well, not just in Australia.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think it is about them that has meant that they're so elusive? Or perhaps they aren't, and we've just been not looking in the right place or asking the wrong people. Is that it? That's your answer?
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. First, they have such a complex life cycle that you won't get the full picture by just following one. I mean, to follow one single individual is quite hard. They have long life cycles. They travel continents, thousands of kilometers. You won't see where they are reproducing. So there was so many bits of that were not registered, and that led to incomplete knowledges about it. But part of that lack of proper understanding came also from not noticing and observing with more care and attention and over time from a consistent way, which in comparison some of the First Nations who had that sensitivity to a deep listening, to a deep observation, managed to understand a bit better, because that's what grounds their system of knowledge is really careful observation and experience with the places and the creatures that they are observing. I
don't believe you. Oh wait, one more thing. You remember we saw an eel together in the Botanic Gardens once?
Yes, that was a cool moment. Yeah, you were there.
Yeah, Nick.
Yeah, so in the Botanic Gardens in Melbourne, there are some lakes, and those lakes are actually the river, Birr-arrung. Now in this moment, and that place presented as lakes, but all of the landscape is the place of the river that keeps changing. It's a dynamic, living entity. And the eels were there because that's part of their journey. It's still one of the sites that they probably find enough resources. And I remember there being a deck, probably going to an ice cream or a coffee, I guess. And
Coffee,
always coffee. This pretty big eel came swimming towards us, right?
yeah, underneath the walkboard.
Yeah. Well, how was for you seeing that?
Amazing. It was very big. It was a lot bigger than I thought. Yeah, something prehistoric looking about it. And I guess that's a lot smaller than they can get, so that's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Well, Alex, I Upon reflection, I think when I floated down here in the Yarra, I ingested a bit more river water than I maybe had realised. So I think I have to go home for personal reasons. So thank you very much for talking to me. I've got to go now.
Well, thank you for inviting. Well done on swimming. That experience is also telling of like where we're at in our relationship with the river. There's a lot of people also swimming and using that to reflect on what's the health of this place, or actually we assume about the health and wellness of this place, and how can we maybe move together into a more balanced relationship. And that's very fun to actually swim. There's a lot of groups doing it. Some exciting research observing that as well. And I've swam before, and we'll keep doing that together, I hope.
Yes. Tube together. Period.
Thanks for having me. Really, it's very cool platform and projects that Nature Disturb have been creating. So I can wait to see what next.
Same to you.
Bye.
Bye.
Okay.
Well, I've walked home and crawled back into my kitchen sink. That was Alex. Those were the eels. This was a tremendous learning experience for all involved. The image in my mind's eye of this place we now call Melbourne, just a few hundred years ago, is so different to what we see now that it's hard to square the two images. Such a huge amount of change in such a short time, and yet eels are still able to call this place home. That will only continue if we commit to understanding them and their unusual lives as best we can. One way I'll be doing that, because I'm an upstanding citizen, is by attending APR's Projections of a Current Future next month, which I think will be wonderful. Thank you, Alex, and the rest of APR for organising the event. Thanks, Alex, for speaking with me today. I feel like he really reined in his whole I'm an eel expert thing today, probably because he knew he was being recorded. And I notice he also didn't give me a definite answer about who of his two boyfriends, Nick and Tom, would win in a fight. Well, I'm not one to shy away from controversy, so I'll say, I think Tom would win. Who do you think would win, listener? Let me know in the comments, basing your answer on only their names. Now it's time for a little poem. Thank you, Damon McMillan, for the music. Thank you so much, listener, for listening. How can I expand upon that? I love you. I don't want to nurture any parasocial relationships, but like, I really see every single listener as like my best friend. I don't know. Is that like weird? I'm not sure. Anyway, here's a little poem. It's called Eels Up My... No, it's not. It's simply called The Exploding Eels Under Melbourne. Let's begin this arbitrarily. Beneath the rain at the crack of dawn, in a garden park of Melbourne, with an eel crawling across a lawn. This ungendered creature has been lately overcome with the insatiable need to leave their pond, and with that their trips begun. As they splash down into the ocean, and as their bodies reach the salt, they start to change, sex organs grow, digestion grinds then to a halt. Silver and metallic, wizened and mature, eels both yonic and phallic, these now sexed creatures must endure. For 3,000 long kilometres, a swim against the EAC, and guided by the moonlight, they reach the coral sea. At the end of this long venture, the last and first stage of the eel, their final moment left intact, and then their skin does peel. The pressure of the water mounts, their organs start to squirm. Bodies rupture, insides collapse, and to mush they finally turn. As the writhing slowly ceases, and there remains the dregs, a great dissolved mass of entrails, amongst it sperm and eggs. Various stages happen next, in relatively quick succession. Let's see here if I listened right when Alex taught his lesson. The fertilised eggs are carried back, and if I'm being careful I should say they then take larval form, the flat-bodied leptocephali. They ride back along the current to the place from whence they came. Invisible strings they then become, and glass becomes their name. The ocean brings them to the coast, solid elvers blown from glass, and once they've turned opaque and firm, they choose to make their pass. From estuaries to waters fresh, leaving salt through river mouths, climbing streams and waterfalls, to find a nice lake which allows their growth to their penultimate stage, and for 15 years they'll mellow, from a rather muddy, mundane brown, to a joyous golden yellow. And one day out the lake they'll heave themselves and start to work it, across the land, silver and leave, to begin once more their circuit.